الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد انتجبه لولايته واختصه برسالته وأكرمه بالنبوة، وأشهد أن عليا ولي الله وأمينه في أرضه وهجته على عباده. اللهم صل وسلم على محمد وآله الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله. أوصيكم عباد الله وإياي بتقوى الله. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I take this opportunity to remind myself of the disciplines of taqwa, and of course reminding you of the very same. Taqwa is something that has been reverberated throughout the Holy Quran. A person who has established Iman in his heart should now struggle and endeavor to reach the stages of taqwa. In our discussions looking at Khutba al-Muttaqeen, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu was-salam was asked by a very elderly companion, Hammam. He approaches the Imam, he says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, describe to me the qualities and the attributes of the Muttaqi. Upon which the Imam alayhi salam, he brushes off the question with a very brief answer. But then he presses, he pushes the Imam alayhi salam, give me something more. Upon which the Imam alayhi salam, in a single moment, spontaneously, without any preparation, begins to speak about over 100 qualities of the Muttaqeen. Now here a question arises, how did the Imam alayhi salam very spontaneously speak about the qualities of the Muttaqeen? Leave alone the idea of his knowledge, leave aside the aspect that he had divine knowledge, or divine knowledge was given to such an individual. The Imam alayhi salam, you could perhaps understand this by saying or by acknowledging that the Imam began to speak about himself. One of the things that we're very good at doing is when we speak about ourselves, we can go on and on and on about our successes and our qualifications and our desires and aspirations. Here the Imam alayhi salam merely talks about himself. And the idea being that he, having established the qualities and the attributes of those who have taqwa, he begins to merely describe those who are clothed in the clothing of taqwa. So, in this particular area that we have reached in the sermon, the Imam alayhi salam, he says very beautifully, he says, وَلَوْلَا الْأَجْلُ الَّذِي كَتَبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ لَمْ تَسْتَكِرَّ أَرْوَاحُهُمْ فِي أَجْسَادِهِمْ طَرْفَةَ عَيْنٍ. He says one other quality of the Muttaqeen is that if it had not been for death, and the prescribed time for death ordained for each and every single human being, or specifically the Muttaqeen, their spirits, arwahuhum lam tastakir, it would never remain still or stabilized, or you could understand this as peaceful. Their arwah, their souls will never be peaceful within their bodies. It would constantly be moving. It is constantly moving towards perfection. Tarfata ayn, even for a twinkling of an eye, the souls would never remain stagnant in their bodies. Why? Shawkan ila thawab, with the eagerness to seek reward, wa khawfan min al-iqab, and because of the fear of chastisement and punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now here the Imam alayhi salam begins to speak about a very powerful concept, and that every single one of us as human beings, our destinies are written by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now our destinies, as they are written by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll find that a number of questions arise. And that is, well, if these destinies are written for us, whatever they are, then what is the point of trying to work towards them? If, for example, I am destined to be sick, then whether I engage in dua, whether I take medicine, Allah has ordained that I will be sick and I will die of such a sickness. So whether I take medicine or I don't take medicine, the end result is one and the same. So what is the point of free will? What is the point of choice? What is the point of dua even? When it comes to the idea of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establishing our fates. In the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it very explicitly clear. It says, وَخَلَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ فَقَدَّرَهُ تَقْدِيرًا, that everything that has been created has a specific measurement that is assigned to it. How much wealth we have, how much knowledge we have, how much health we have, how long we will live for. Everything, every creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a specific measure determined for them. So now when the question is presented, if our fates are written by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is the point of free will? Our ulama, they provide an answer. And the answer is that everything is written for us based on the free will that we have. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will write for me that I will live up to the age of 74. At the age of 74, I will be stricken with a particular illness. But if I refuse to take medicine, or if I refuse to visit the doctor, then I will die at the age of 74. But if I go and I take medicine, and I, for example, take certain go on, for example, certain dietary, for example, then that medicine will work. The opinions of the doctors will be beneficial for me, and I will carry on living for another 12 years, for example. So I will not die at the age of 24 or 74, I will die later on. That is considering or taking into consideration of the fact that I will consume certain medicines or I will go on certain programs for my own health. The second idea that's been presented by the people, or the question that has been presented by the people, is that within Islam, are our destinies changeable? Can they change from one to the other? According to the ayah of the Holy Quran, absolutely. The religion of Islam explains that there are two types of destinies. There is the first type of destiny that is unchangeable, like our death. Death in itself is a principle that is for every single human being, for everything that breathes, everything that moves, everything that is alive. Death will overpower them. كل نفس ذائقة الموت وَاعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى تَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ. Worship your Lord until yaqeen comes towards you. What's yaqeen? Death. It's something that every single human being has established for himself. We all have yaqeen that death will come and overpower us. There are certain things that are unchangeable, like death in itself. No one will live for eternal or eternally. But there are certain areas which do change. Our fate and our destinies are capable of changing. One of them is when we will die, how we will die. Death is fixed, but how we embrace death is capable of changing. How much wealth I will earn for the next year, for example. The a'mal that we perform during Laylatul Qadr, that has the power and the potential to change our destinies. Those aspects within our lives which are capable of changing, which again is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a very interesting verse in the Holy Quran. When the angels came to Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, and they conversed with Sarah, the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam, they said to him, or they said to her, قَالُوا أَتَعْجَبِينَ مِنْ أَمْرِ اللَّهِ. They came with bishara, with glad tidings. Sarah, you will now give birth to a son. She's very old. She will give birth to a son, Ishaq alayhi salam. And she was shocked by such a news. So the angels, they responded, أَتَعْجَبِينَ مِنْ أَمْرِ اللَّهِ. Are you shocked by the affairs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the power of Allah? رَحْمَةُ اللَّهِ وَبَرَكَاتُهُ عَلَيْكُمْ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ إِنَّهُ حَمِيدٌ مَجِيدٌ. It says that Allah's mercy and His blessings are upon you, O members of the household of Ibrahim alayhi salam. إِنَّهُ حَمِيدٌ مَجِيدٌ. He is worthy of praise and He is glorious. Allama Tabatabai, when it comes to the tafsir of this verse, he says that the reason why she was shocked, number one, is because she was at an age where giving birth to a child was impossible, number one. And number two, giving birth to a child, especially for those who are old, is not something that's embraced by communities at large. It's something that the people in the community would scoff at. The angels, their reaction is even more surprising. They speak to her and they ask her a negative question. So why are you surprised of the power of Allah and the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? All this time Allah did not give you a child, but Allah at this moment in time has decreed for you to give birth to a child. Why are you surprised at the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Have you not witnessed the qudra and the quwwah of Allah before? This message that they were now giving Sarah was a hopeful, reassuring message. that at times within our lives or within your lives, things can seem impossible. But at the end of the day, it is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He can change our destinies from one to the other. And our destinies are capable of changing, especially for those who have close proximity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The angels, they then begin to speak about the mercy of Allah. They begin to speak about the mercy upon that specific family. They said to Sarah, have you not witnessed the power of Allah in the life of Ibrahim before? That now you are shocked by the power of Allah? Did He not save Ibrahim from the fire? Sarah was alongside him when Ibrahim was thrown in the fire. Have you not seen Ibrahim being aided and assisted by Allah, especially when he confronted the idol worshippers and the priests of the temples? Sarah again was alongside Ibrahim during this time. She witnessed all of this throughout her life. Then the angels say, well, if you saw that, then why are you surprised by the power of Allah now? And of course, towards the end of the verse, they mention two very specific qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah is number one, Hamid. He is someone who is worthy of praise, someone who is good, someone who is noble. And then He is Majid as well. Majid is when you grant someone a favor without them being deserving of it, or without them having earned it. You give someone a gift without them showing that they deserve that particular gift. And of course, we all have seen many different blessings and gifts within our lives, which we should turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be thankful for Him for those specific gifts. Even when the odds are stacked against us, we know that our destinies can change. And because the reason why this is because ultimately everything is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now coming back to Khutbatul Muttaqeen, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. He says that if it was not for death, if it was not for this destiny that has been written for every single human being, the soul is never at peace. It is always pushing and exhausting, that the human being is pushing towards levels of perfection. It is always bettering the human being, if not for this world, but for the hereafter specifically. Imagine, and this is an example given by the ulama, they say imagine a chicken within the egg. Imagine a fetus within the womb of its mother. It's constantly moving, it's bettering itself, it's developing. When it reaches the peak of its development, the peak of its perfection, it is now ready to hatch. It then enters this world. The fetus is now ready to be delivered, and it enters this world. It doesn't remain within the egg or within the womb for a very long period of time. Once it reaches that perfected position or state, it is ready to enter the world. It's the likeness of the human being. Before death approaches us, we should have attained the maximum perfection possible within our capacities or within our hands, so that when we embrace death, we are then able to leave this world, just as how the fetus is ready to leave the womb, just as how the egg or the chicken is ready to leave the egg. Question arises, how do I develop myself spiritually? The Imam alayhi salam within Khutbatul Muttaqeen mentions, he says, Shawkan min al-thawab wa khawfan min al-aqab. He says, keep your eyes towards the hereafter. Do not watch and keep a glance over this world. Constantly, whichever dimension you are, whatever you're engaging in this world, make sure that your eyesight is towards the hereafter. Within our work, within our development, within our businesses, we shouldn't just focus on the material aspects of this world, but rather we should look towards the hereafter. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to build ourselves the honorable homes in heavens, insha'Allah, through our taqwa, through our actions and amalun salih, insha'Allah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه ولا منازع له في أمره الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه ولا شبيه له في عظمته نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد جاء من عنده مصدقا للمرسلين خلف فينا راية الحق عليا وأولاده المعصومين حجج الله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليهم وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, in the past week there are certain incidences that have taken place which in one way or another are shocking yet not yet anticipated in regards to many different aspects that have taken place in the final week. For example, the space race. Number two, if you look at the Euro finals, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. It highlights one very important aspect that we all go through within our lives. And if you look at how community members or how members within our own societies behave, you find that there is a massive identity crisis. Even globally, you could say. People do not know how to identify themselves. And so naturally there is a void within their own lives. Now when you approach the Holy Quran, when you approach the Sunnah, the message of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, Islam in general, you find that Islam explains that we ought to identify ourselves based on the messages of the Holy Quran. The whole identity of taqwa, for example. Khutba al-Muttaqin is when the Imam alayhi salam says that you as a human being should identify yourself as a person who has taqwa. That we should be God-loving, that we should be good-natured individuals, God-centric individuals. That motivates us to do good, that repels us from different types of evil. It makes us approach God in a specific way, a person who sees the world through the lenses of taqwa. It makes us approach one another and interact with ourselves, not from just the physical aspect, but also from a spiritual aspect as well. Now, when religion is shoved aside, there is a void that is created, and people wish to fill this void that is naturally created. Other ways, people use other means to try and identify themselves with. When you look at, for example, the billionaires in this world, they have everything that they could ever wish for. As in, we would wish that we had that amount of wealth that they have. Yet, despite having everything in the world at their fingertips, they constantly want more. Last night we spoke about Dhul Qarnayn. There's a very beautiful concept that the ulama speak of, and that is, of course, which has been reinforced by the ahadith of the Prophet as well as the a'immat al-athhar, is that a person naturally is corrupted by power, especially when the world is given to them in their fingertips and their desires are met. It corrupts. That's why only specified individuals are capable of being leaders. Dhul Qarnayn being one of them, Sulaiman being another, Dawood alayhi salam being another, and so on and so forth. Divine individuals have the responsibility of leadership. Why? Because they are able to control the world and, of course, give dominance towards their spiritualities first and foremost. Now, there's a space race that is going on. Who is first? Who can be the first person to go into space and come back? There's an interesting tweet that Elon Musk posted where he said, do not insult space travel and exploration because this is a hope for millions in the world. It's not a hope for millions in the world. People are, for example, queuing outside food banks in the thousands. They don't have money to even survive. People are worried because of poverty, and it's a legitimate concern. It's not an interest of people to understand what is going out there, what is going on out there in the world or in the universe, especially when they have deep concerns and problems within this world. Number two, let me give you another example. A person who identifies themselves as homosexuals, who are absolutely pro-LGBTQ and the whole movement. When you come across a person who is homosexual, they identify first and foremost that they are homosexuals. I am gay and this is how I identify myself. No, your sexual orientation is a part of you. It is not you as a human being. It is a part of your life. It is a part of your identity. Usually people speak about their occupation, people speak about their aspirations, how they are fathers, how they are sons, how they, for example, the different successes in their lives, the different experiences that they've gone through, something that carries profound meaning. Sexual orientation does not carry much meaning, yet you find that there is a massive or a very strong movement in this world where people identify themselves based on their sexual orientation. It's as if people have moved away from that which is more weighty and much more important. In the previous week, very interestingly as well as disgustingly, the Labour Council hired an actor who dressed or was dressed in a coloured monkey suit with a male genitalia exposed publicly. This actor wearing this suit came to a public library in Redbridge in London, simply to encourage children to read books. There was a heavy backlash by the parents who demonstrated absolute disgust to such behavior. This is grooming. This is sexualization of children from a very young age. It does not encourage children to read books. It traumatizes children from that young age. How is this different from child abuse? Except that this is coming from our leaders, this is coming from our representatives from the local council. Now, Redbridge in London is notorious for being a Muslim populated area, and they have been actively fighting and battling against RSC and the sexual education curricula for many, many years. Everyone responsible for this behavior should be held accountable. The librarians who allowed for this to happen should be held accountable and should be fired. The actor should have known better to take on such a gig. The councils, the Labour councillors who allowed for this to happen, again, should be held accountable for their actions and reprimanded for and rebuked for their actions. Everyone involved in this particular incident should be held responsible. I'll give you a third example. Football and the UEFA finals is another example, very interesting example. The intense love for football is something that is shown by the wider public, especially within the UK. And at times it has gone into areas which is absolutely disgusting. And we saw this in the past few days. Subconsciously, people are using or have used football to identify themselves. And we see this very clearly. What team you support, yes? It's people wanting to identify themselves based on what their families and their friends identify themselves with, to try and fit in with the crowd that they hang around with. Subconsciously, people have used football to form their identities. Now, what's interesting is the racism that has manifested during the England matches, especially after the finals. The team that supported BLM and the whole BLM movement taking the knee were eventually booed by the very same fans that had come to watch them. The Tory MPs refused to vindicate, refused to condemn the booing of the fans. Notoriously, Boris Johnson refused to condemn the booing of the fans. Likewise, the Home Secretary Priti Patel, she refused to condemn such actions. Tyrone Mings, very famously in Twitter, he said that Priti Patel, had stoked the fire of racism, defending the fans who booed black players taking the knee during the Euro 2020 final with Italy. Racism, abuse after a football match or tournament is very much accepted. And these are the quotations and the words of Gary Neville. He said, after every tournament, we accept abuse and we see abuse and we have simply normalized it. And this is the reason why this is because such abuse has been delivered from top down. The leaders of our own communities, the leaders of our societies have allowed such abuse to manifest. So when the final penalties were taken and were missed, the racism came out. People began pointing fingers and said, you missed the penalty simply because you are black. The racism eventually came out. Leave aside the racism, the hooliganism, again, is a shame in itself. The chaos that ensued after the match and the violence, if guilty by UEFA investigations, England could be forced to play without any fans. Essentially, it all comes back to identity. How do you and I identify ourselves? Those who use certain aspects of this world to mold their own identities, whether it's the wealth of this world, whether it's football, whether it's race, whether it's sexual orientation, ultimately it carries no weight. But if you and I identify ourselves based on the messages of the Ahl al-Bayt and based on the attributes of taqwa as prescribed by Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, you find that it is divine, you find that it has pure meaning and it carries weight. اللهم صل على عبدك ورسولك سيد المرسلين ورسول رب العالمين محمد المصطفى صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أمير المؤمنين ووسي رسول رب العالمين علي المرتضى. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى سيدة النساء العالمين وبذءة الخاتم النبيين فاطمة الزهراء عليه السلام. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى سيد شباب أهل الجنة الحسن المجتبى والحسين سيد الشهداء عليه السلام. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والهجة بن الحسن قائم المنتظر المهدي. أرواحنا وأرواح العالمين له الفداء. اللهم افتح له فتحا يسيرا وانصره نصرا عزيزا. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة في سبيلك وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم